I didn't even speak for like the first year because I was so scared. But then ultimately, like I got pretty good at it, really bonded like with my sensei and my teachers, and it just became my path in life, physically, mentally, spiritually. And so being very young at a formative age and being pretty much, obviously my mother and my father raised me, but I was like raised in my dojo. Like I could have cared less about school. And the only other thing I cared remotely about was music, punk rock music. It was like, okay, I'll go to school, but then it's like I'm either at the dojo or I'm at a hardcore show.
That was Erika Mitchener, and this is the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. Happy 2018. I'm Jess, your host, and this is episode 86 of the YTP, episode number 1 of the new year. I'm psyched to be kicking off the year with such a strong female presence on the show and someone who gets that it just can't be nutrition and it just can't be physical training because neither of those will work to their highest without the mental piece. Oh yeah, yep. I'm talking about mindfulness and meditation being the key component to this trifecta of high vibe living. And speaking of integral pieces of health, the Yogi Triathlete Cookbook, High Vibe Recipes for the Athlete Appetite is out. You can buy your copy on Amazon or at yogitriathlete.com/shop, where we also have some new awesome merch. We have a new design for our Awake and Ready tees, tanks, and long sleeves, as well as our newest edition, Snooze is for Sissies. Yeah, you heard it right. So check it out, yogitriathlete.com/shop. Pre-orders for the shirts end January 5th, so get it in this week. Signed copies for the book are ready to ship right now. All right, back to our amazing guest. I first became aware of Erika last year when we sat down with her soul partner, John Joseph McGowan, to record his podcast, YTP number 21. If you haven't listened to our conversation with John, I highly recommend checking it out. We've had some pretty intense stories shared on this podcast, but his is pretty hard to imagine. Violence, hardship, major redemption. There's joy in there, veganism, and a lot of passion. John's story is definitely one of a kind, and so is his dialect. Although Erika is not quite as colorful as John, she does drop several F-bombs throughout this episode. So if you've got the kids with you, I want to make sure that you are well informed because we don't censor our guests. This show is about sharing stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose. And I hope you can all see through the words to the beauty that lies underneath the authenticity of these conversations. Our guest today holds a double black belt in karate, the first of which she earned at the age of 17, as well as the black belt equivalent in jiu-jitsu. She is tough as nails, yet possesses a softness that is so comforting to be around. Unless, of course, she's demonstrating self-defense moves on you, which she did on me during the podcast, and then again in a video extra that we'll be posting for our Patreon supporters this week. So if you've ever wondered what I sound like when I feel the sensation of pain, that will be dispelled on the show today. Erika is a personal trainer, a lifelong martial arts disciple. Well, I guess that is ever since she fell in love with Ralph Macchio. She is a triathlete, but she found that triathlon is not where her heart rests, and she is a yogi. At the age of 12, she began her journey in the dojo. Having no children's program left her practicing with adults at a young age and no doubt had a massive influence on her progress. At the age of 15, she explains the extreme outdoor training that she endured as a part of her practice. We dive into meditation and the different styles and traditions that she has studied, moving back from Japanese tradition all the way to India, where it all began. And she shares the event in her life that forced her to go deeper in her practice in order to heal, which ultimately led her to her first teacher, a woman who she, unbeknownst to her, was already connected with, showing us once again the perfection of the divine timeline when the breadcrumbs are picked up and followed. Erika is an animal ambassador and a vegan who has exhausted her nutritional path, having been vegan, not vegan, vegan again, not vegan, and vegan again. This time, we think it's forever. She's very passionate about aligning her actions with her values and philosophical beliefs, but she's open to assist anyone no matter where they are in their path. She opens up about the difficulties of living amongst so much homelessness in New York City and the work that she is called upon to do every day in order to navigate the realities of what she is witness to. Erika is for sure living the Awake and Ready life. And if you enjoy our conversation today, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. This month, we'll be giving away 3 pairs of 2XU compression run socks to 3 randomly picked January reviewers. I've been running in these babies lately, and not only are they super comfy, I feel like they're really playing a big part in my ability to hit it day after day. So thank you everyone who left a review so far, and congrats to Mark, who won the December giveaway and is now the proud owner of a 2XU transition bag. Sweet! That is over $100 value right there. So we are so grateful for the support. Your reviews help so much with our rankings in iTunes, and we believe in you guys to show up for us as we show up for you. All right, one more super awesome piece of news. I want to welcome Deepthi and Rachel to the Yogi Triathlete team. These ladies have some major 2018 goals, and we are psyched to have been chosen as their guides. Deepthi is going to kill it at Oceanside 70.3, and we'll be prepping Rachel to torch the Chicago Marathon course next fall. Rachel joined us for our first high vibe retreat, and I guess you could say that it left her wanting more. We couldn't be more honored to have their energy on our team. If you've been thinking about training with us, we do have spaces left, so shoot over an email and let's get the convo started. It is never too soon to begin mastering your life and your sport. And speaking of getting the convo started, let's get on with my conversation with Ms. Double Black Belt Super Ninja Warrior Queen, Erika Mitchener. I was first introduced to you when you weren't even here, when I was in your home over a year ago interviewing your man.
Yeah.
And he was saying, you got to interview my woman. She's so badass. And then we connected on social and we've been in touch, and we tried to hook it up in California.
Yeah.
Like a few months ago, and that didn't happen. No. But now I'm here and I'm back in New York. And so here we are. I'm psyched to have you here.
Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and
usually John does all the talking.
I know.
I get to talk today.
Well, it was funny because you were saying like, well, he'll be back from tour. Let's do it Monday. Like if you want to do both of us. And I was like, okay, that'd be great. That'd be fun if he's around. But then I'm like, we're never going to get your story out if he's around. We love him. But I'm like, we're never going to get your story.
Yeah.
So we're referring to John Joseph McGowan, who was on our podcast. I think he's like podcast 21 and definitely a pod favorite, as he normally is.
I don't
on everybody's.
swear as much as him at all.
But you can say whatever you want. How did you guys meet? That's a question that I have.
Oh God. There's a long story and then a medium story and a short story. The short story is I met him when I was living in Santa Barbara. And he had been out there on tour, and this was 2011, and he had started doing these Nike running camps, and Nike asked him to do as like an ambassador. So this was like right when that sort of ambassadorship stuff started happening with social media, and they had reached out to him and like Brendan Fraser to do these like little running camps. It was also kind of when actually on Facebook, if someone invited you to an event, you saw it and you would go because you weren't like inundated with 50 events a day. So this is how the stars aligned. And I saw the event and I was like, oh, John Joseph from Cro-Mags is doing this running camp down in Venice Beach. I should go, because I'm a fan of the Cro-Mags and it's not a show type environment. And, I had been living in Santa Barbara for a number of years working as a personal trainer. So obviously it was a, fitness related thing, and there were going to be other people there. And so I'm going to go, and I have like my mom in my head being like, Erika, you should go, put yourself out there.
Did you know about the Cro-Mags before? Because you like hardcore music.
No, yeah. No, I knew about the Cro-Mags. Like I remember like coming down to New York and like seeing them play at CB's and like, everybody, if you're a hardcore kid on the East Coast or anywhere in the world, knows about the Cro-Mags. Like it's a thing.
But you've never met him.
No.
Does that start to get into the long story?
That's the longer version, but we'll just pick up right here.
If we want to dig in details, we'll ask.
Maybe someday I'll actually put like the long version on my own website, and I'll let the world know about it. So then So I go down and I'm like super nervous because I'm just nervous about social situations in general when I don't really know anybody. And I was apparently the first person to show up, and it was just me and him in the parking lot in Venice Beach. And I'm like, hey, like trying to be super cool, like super cool girl, like fitness, like music, you know, like, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting. So we just started talking, and like, we just sort of like hit it off right away. He's so charming, and he just makes you just feel at ease when you're around him. Like, anyway, so then only one other person shows up. Nobody came. So it's just me and John Joseph from the Cro-Mags and this other guy, Matt Rosignio, who actually you'll know from Strong Hearts, and he's a vegan registered dietitian. So he's actually really well known in the vegan community. But he's also an old hardcore kid too. And it was the three of us. So we like ran Venice Beach, worked out. John like had me like lead the workout. So I was like, okay. And then like Matt had to go because he was like leaving for some cross country like bike trip the next day, like cycling. And then it was just me and John. And he was like, we're going out to eat. And I'm like, okay. and then on it secretly turned into like a date. Like, this is not my life. I came down to hang out with like 30 people and go for a run. And I'm sitting across from the table with John Joseph, like chatting about life. And he was obviously like a perfect gentleman. But there was like, you know, when like you're a female and your radar goes off a little, where you're like, are you trying to put like not the moves? Like, wasn't trying to like, you know, like have me like stay in LA for the night. He was just being like more of a gentleman than I had kind of expected. So I was like, okay.
So he was a little suspect to you. That's so funny. And he was probably like, this is awesome. I'm on a date with this girl. And you're like, I thought it was just going to work out.
So
and like
now we
go
joke
home.
about it because he's like, oh no, I stalked you on Facebook and I wanted to like meet you anyways. And I was
so
like,
did he already know about you?
So he comes clean about the fact that like he had like kind of seen my pictures on Facebook about like me doing martial arts or karate and stuff like that, and was like, who's this girl?
So it was a perfect world when it was just you that showed up.
I guess so, yeah.
And so, but he knew of you before you guys met.
Well, yeah,
is that what you're
because
saying?
of Facebook.
But that's so interesting that
yeah,
that you meet up and like only this other one guy. It was perfect.
Yeah,
it was a perfect combo, and you guys have been together ever since.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
That was 7 years ago.
I love it. So that was 7 years ago. So you've been on quite a journey with him.
Yeah. That was before he even like had done any of his Ironmans. He was still like, I'm going to do an Ironman someday. And I was like, what the fuck is an Ironman? Like, yeah. So I like label myself like the Ironman girlfriend. Like, so I've been there since, you know, the first one he did in New York. And like, he's done Kona twice now. So.
And was it your first one? Was the New York Triathlon your first one?
I did a triathlon sprint, not this summer, but the summer before that, to just kind of try it out and see how it would go. I did that with my best friend, and we did it in Massachusetts at Hopkinton State Park.
Oh, yeah.
And
I know that.
Yeah, it was really great, excellent, well run. And so I was like, okay, I definitely want to commit to doing a full triathlon next year. So when I was a little bit on the fence, but one evening we were out to dinner with Gene and his girlfriend, Suzanne. Am I saying her name right? Oh, I'm terrible
I think
names.
it's Suzanne.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
And he was like, so how do you feel about doing another triathlon for the farm sanctuary? And I'm like, I can't say no to Gene.
Right. I know.
So I'm like, yeah, sign me up.
He's the sweetest guy.
So if you're going to do it for a cause, you know, because it was a hard training process for me. And if I had just been some solo triathlete run without a team or without a cause to raise money for, I might have quit. I gotta admit.
Well, I love it, you know, and you actually had texted me yesterday. We're pretty transparent on the show, but you had texted me yesterday kind of like, well, I did this triathlon and I don't think it's for me. And like, do you still want to have me on the show? And I love that because that's like life. And Yogi Triathlete was something that I was like, I don't even want to say it was my brainchild. It was a download that came in from a higher source like a long, long time ago. And in the height of me being a triathlete, nobody knew about Yogi Triathlete. And now that people like Yogi Triathlete has all this momentum, guess who just sold her tri bike? Me. And so, yeah, and it's so weird because it's like, oh my God, now like what's happening? I want to be so transparent with it. Like it's not filling my heart like it did.
Oh, that's so interesting that you like said that it's not filling your heart. Because when I was thinking about it, it was like, how do I explain to you how I feel about it? And I was like, I did it and I'm really proud I did it. And I was super stoked for a whole week, but I didn't have a heart connection with it ultimately. And so without, like, I love to swim in the pool if I want to go for a swim, and I love to ride my bike. I could see myself doing a bike race. I hate running. As a personal trainer, I'm so sorry for everyone who's like, let's run. I'm like, maybe I'll do a 5K after that. Yeah. F off. Like the 10K for me in that race was like a fucking huge deal. Like, I was so dramatic about the whole thing. And like during the training process about running, but then ironically, the run was my favorite part during the race.
That's awesome.
Even though I hate running.
It is. Anyways. Well, I mean, and there's something about a triathlon that's so fun, and I don't want people to think like it doesn't fill my heart anymore. It doesn't fill my heart anymore in a way where I'm out there and I'm doing the 6-hour bikes on Saturday to do like Ironman, like weekend after week. What fills my heart now is working with athletes in the capacity of teaching them mindfulness and meditation. And that fills my heart, not because I've chosen it, but I feel like it was this perfect progression of like, I've spent the last 12 years of my life training and racing, Ironmans, half Ironmans, marathons, all of that. And really testing out how you can have this yoga mindset and the benefits of meditation on the mindset of an athlete and everything. Yeah. And I felt like I did my last half Iron, or just the last one I did was in May of this year, and I had so much fun and I loved it. And I had an awesome run for me. And I just was like, I just felt like when I crossed that finish line, I was like, okay, that's it for a while.
It's time for you to evolve.
Yeah. And so unlike you, I found like this new love for running. And so I'm doing more like focusing on more like ultra marathon distance.
Good for you. I'm happy for you. And I genuinely find happiness for other people's happiness in endurance sports, obviously, because I live with someone who's like obsessed with Ironmans. Like he is the definition of the dude in his 50s who's like eats, sleeps, and breathes Ironman. I love it. I totally support him and everybody else that like finds their heart connection through that endurance training and can like process their demons through it. But for me personally, ultimately it had a lot to do with me always wanting to do it. I did a sprint. I did the full length one, Olympic. And then it's like, I did it. I proved myself I can do it. I applied, like you said, my meditation techniques and my mindset training to the training process. I wanted to quit really bad. I didn't. And I fucking crossed that line and got that medal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and like now, okay, I'm going to be a better trainer for my clients.
Yes.
Because I put myself in this situation where I was like, fuck this shit. But I'm doing it anyways because I committed to doing it and I know I can do it, and I'm not going to listen to like the negative voices in my head. I'm going to apply, my mindset techniques, that mental power to get through this. Like, yes. You can do this. And so because I put myself and walk in that shoe, I say, okay, well, next time I have someone as a client that says, oh, I'm thinking about doing a triathlon, I can honestly say in my heart center, okay, I can coach you on this. Like, I haven't done a lot of them, but I've done it enough to know I can lead you through this process. It may not be pretty, but I'll get you over that line, just like everybody in my life got me over the line. So
yeah. And I think that like your experience of doing it is now going to allow you to be a better, a more skillful coach. And that's just what I feel like for me to focus on what my higher being is saying like, you need to focus on right now. I can't be out there doing 6-hour bikes every Saturday and training 20 hours a week because frankly, like athletes are
programs to write.
Yeah. Right. And athletes
thing, yeah.
want this. And so I need to show up for them. And I feel like I've spent so much time on the race course in training, really testing out these techniques and how you can use the mind. And so anyway, it's like, it's not that that triathlon's not filling me up. It's filling me up in a new way.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you.
You're going from student to teacher.
Yes.
Like, it's like an analogy, like, so for those of you who don't know, the reason why John says I'm such a badass is, and like I do my emoji eye roll, is because I grew up doing martial arts since I was 12. So I know it's something we wanted to bring up on the podcast. So I started training in a very traditional Japanese dojo. I was tall for my age. There was really no kids program. So I got put in the adult class when I was 12.
What
like
brought you
going
to
through puberty and then training with like dudes who are like hardcore Shokan, people who are doing karate, jujitsu, weapons. I didn't even speak for like the first year because I was so scared. But then ultimately, like I got pretty good at it, really bonded like with my sensei and my teachers. And it just became my path in life, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so being very young at a formative age and being pretty much, obviously my mother and my father raised me, but I was like raised in my dojo. Like I could have cared less about school. And the only other thing I cared remotely about was music, punk rock music. It was like, okay, I'll go to school, but then it's like I'm either at the dojo or I'm at a hardcore show.
So what brought you to martial arts at such a young age?
My mother knew somebody through the office that she worked in that trained at this dojo, and she knew that I had the biggest crush on Ralph Macchio from the Karate Kid since I was 6 years old. To this day, John still knows, like, I'm like, he's my number one. And I finally got to meet him because he did a show, like, on Off-Broadway, like, 2 years ago. And I was dying because it was a super small theater. And his character came out, and he sat right next to me in the theater. And I'm, like, dying in my seat. I'm, like almost having a heart attack. So I'm like, freaking Ralph Macchio sitting next to me. Like, I could see so many famous people, and I won't tell you the names of people, obviously, I rubbed elbows with, like, because I have some great associations now. And, like, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Hey, what's up, dude? But I'm just like,
But Ralph Macchio is like, it's a whole other situation.
Anybody that grew up in the 80s knows what I'm talking about.
Oh my God,
so
totally.
then something just clicked in my mom's head, and I was kind of a spaz when I was a kid, and like, she's like, you have to get your energy out. And she just signed me up, and she like made me go. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go.
So what was the turning point?
Oh, the turning point?
Like
was,
when you, all of a sudden you were like, I'm either at the dojo or I'm at hardcore or.
Well, it's interesting because when you're learning martial arts at that age, everything's awkward and you're not really good at it. But through repetition, you start to build the skill. And once you build the skill, you get like a sense of power behind like your kicks or your punches, whatever you're doing. And you get positive feedback from your instructors. And then that just sort of builds and builds and builds to the point where like they kind of realize like, oh, you're kind of good at this. And when you're young and you realize you're like good at something and like people are telling you you're good, but in a very humble way, because it was a very traditional school, it was like, well, we can tell you that you're good, but only after you've done this kata like a fucking zillion times and we've told you that it was shitty. And now maybe you'll get like, oh, that looked very good. Your sensei tells you that, you're like, oh, it like means the world. And then that was it. It was just something just clicked. So I was hooked.
Was it the, like it's like a pretty hardcore discipline.
Yeah. I cried a lot. Like I was, like I'm thinking about almost I should make a memoir of it because like there was this training that we would do in October called the Gashuku. And a gashuku is a traditional Japanese term for what's considered outdoor training in the winter or in the ocean or in the forest. And you put your body through like an extreme test. So you go from training inside to training outside. And so I was like 15 and we would go up to Maine. I was with my dojo members, for the whole weekend away from my parents and home. And we would sleep on the dojo floor and at 4:00 in the morning get woken up with pots and pans being banged over our head. So apparently, I don't know, because this is what I'm just used to. Apparently they actually do that like in military boot camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get to wake up.
Are you sure you were in military boot camp?
No. You wake up at the crack of dawn, like 3 hours before the sun comes up, and you go out to the beach and you run the beach. And then as the sun is rising, you do your karate kicks, like your techniques in the water, like push-ups in the water, kicks in the water. And I was a brown belt at that point. And when you're a higher rank, you're expected to go up above your waist and like keep training because you're higher rank. And it's October in the ocean in Maine. I was so cold when I got out of the water that my hands wouldn't work and I couldn't get my like gi off and I was soaked like outside. But this is like my normal at like 15. And then of course just like all the training in the dojo where like you're just like
is that common?
Getting like kicked and punched.
So
and like
was this you?
Yeah, this is normal.
Working
like any traditional karateka person, even if they're female and young, would be like, oh yeah, that's normal.
That's so funny because
Yeah.
that's not what we like. So, but is this you on your journey to getting your? Because John said you're like a double black belt.
Oh,
which
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what the hell that means. But
No, it just
I'm getting an
means that,
idea
like-
of how badass you are, and I don't want to piss you off
No,
because you're so sweet.
no. It just that's good. Yeah. No, a black belt is just
What does it take to get a black belt?
you can't quit. Like, and you have to have good technique and be very respectful and be very humble and just keep training hard.
So you have like
everybody's capable of doing it, but in a good school, it should take you minimum 4 years, minimum.
And when did you earn your first black belt?
And I was 17, so it took from age 12 to 17, a little bit longer because I think they held off because I was young, and they didn't want to give me a black belt too young and hadn't earned it yet. So I have a black belt in karate. And then my school also taught Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. And so I have also a equivalent black belt rank in Jiu-Jitsu.
How do those two arts differ?
Oh, well, the karate, if you're layman's terms, it's standing kicks, punches. You're going to do a kata.
What's a kata?
A kata is moving meditation. Kind of like, when you see the guys doing the Tai Chi where they're just like flowing.
Yeah.
But it's very flowy. Or you see the Kung Fu monks in Asia doing, in China doing their techniques. But then also in karate, like that form is called a kata.
It's almost like
So-
like a prostration
Yeah.
of like Buddhism or something. You know how they do the prostrations, like they'll do like the moving meditation type thing, or no?
No, it's not. To correct you.
No, that's good.
I will tell you. No,
I don't have to be
incorrect.
right. I don't have to be right.
A kata is you are practicing a fight
Okay.
sequence. So so the application of kata is called bankai. When then you have people surrounding you, attacking you, and you do the techniques, that practical application of the technique of the downward block, of the punch, of the strike that you were doing to the air, but now you are applying it to a human who is attacking you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did you watch the Karate Kid?
No, I'm totally like picturing like the final
Mr.
round scene.
Mr. Miyagi and Daniel San like on the beach
Yes.
practicing kata.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I'm picturing.
Right.
But
Right.
Miyagi didn't make him do push-ups in waist-deep water.
Well, he
I
had
think
him
that no,
bathed.
he did. No, he had him like. There was some beach scene.
There was some beach scene.
Get your Karate Kid history straight.
I
'cause
love
could do
that
a whole
you
podcast.
got to meet
I could do a whole podcast just about the
Amachio
Karate
and
Kid.
the Karate Kid.
If he listens to this.
And then jiu-jitsu it's like the grappling,
It's
right?
grappling of it. So essentially every fight is going to end up on the ground, or you don't want it to, but it could go there. So what's the point of knowing all these kicks and punches if someone's going to grab you and your fight ends up on the ground, but you're not going to know what to do? So now you have that groundwork, or in the style that I was taught, Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, it's referred to as dirty street fighting, where you're really learning a lot of like the techniques of, this may look like just a closed hand, simple technique, but what it really means is you're gouging the person's eyes out before they hit the ground. That kind of stuff, or pressure points that will subdue. Just simple things like
You were just about to do something.
I know. Well, I could just demonstrate.
Do you want to subdue me?
So this is so I'm taking the palm of your hand right now, and I'm taking your thumb, and I'll do this very gently.
Okay.
But this is something that I'll
you.
teach women in self-defense if they can get this right, where you just go like that. Well, you're very flexible. You go like this.
Oh, yeah.
And it hurts.
Yeah.
So I took your thumb and I just like pushed it in.
Yeah.
You're a yogi and you have good joints.
I was a massage therapist for a long time, too.
Oh, yeah.
I bet
so
that's it.
I'd have to push a little bit harder, but...
Yeah, I can feel that. There's
can
like,
feel that,
so
like,
right in there, like
immediately.
it's like jamming up that saddle
Yeah,
joint.
and then even like this.
Ow! That one hurt.
And that literally took me like no effort. And you're just like, fuck.
Yeah, interesting.
So, but then you learn all that little stuff, but then also you learn like, how to do arm bars and chokes and submissions and throws. Like I know all the traditional
So
judo
you're pretty
throws.
well equipped.
Yeah. But through that, like I learned all the mindset training.
This is what I want to get into.
So
yeah.
this is a segue to like, okay, we could talk about karate and jiu-jitsu and judo.
I can still feel that on my thumbnail.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
I'll massage it out.
She's gonna do it again.
We can talk about judo chops all day, but if you're in a good dojo, what they're teaching you is meditation. So before every class and at the end of every class, you sit in mokuso. So you sit and you meditate, just like how a Zen monk meditates. You sit on your knees and you put your hands on your knees and you have a very straight back and you're taught to close your eyes. Now, I know different meditation techniques now where you're sitting and you're very open and your eyes are open and your gaze is down. That's a different technique. But the first technique that I was introduced to was Zazen, like in a traditional Zen way, because Zen is, associated with martial arts because it's just like peanut butter and jelly. So it just all comes together, So by the time I was 16, I was like meditating for fun, and all I cared about was reading books about, Miyamoto Musashi and like ancient Japanese philosophers. And I went on to study Japanese in college, and I lived in Japan and study Japanese philosophy. So like I made that like my life's path, because if I wasn't going to be in the dojo training, all I cared about was studying like the philosophical aspect of it to life. And then probably when I was like 25, I was a teacher for a couple of years, or trying to be. I just hated it. And I was like, oh, what do I do with my life, And I was like, I was just so happy teaching karate. And I was at work, and one of my friends was like, well, you should look into school to be a personal trainer. And it's just like a light just went off in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, like I might not be able to have my own dojo right now or teach karate again right now. I know how to train I've been already teaching martial arts and like teaching conditioning classes to adults and kids I have all that experience under my belt. I just have to get my certification and apply everything that I did from the dojo physically and spiritually to my clients. So that's what I try and do for my life.
No, I love that. And it's like we consider it like we consider what we do at Yogi Triathlete as like holistic performance. And I feel like that holistic type of performance and coaching is on the rise, which is wonderful because there's people like us that have been doing it for a long time. And we're the people to go to, people like us and Erika and like our guest that we just launched today. We were recording this on Monday, and we just launched somebody today, which I would consider to be a holistic coach as well. So they're teaching you these mind skills, and you're meditating like before and after when you're in the dojo. But what is like? I'm making an assumption that the message is that you're going into these fights. You call them fights.
Oh, you mean like
in karate? Yeah,
it's sparring or
sparring.
kumite. Yeah.
Okay, so when you go into this, you're going into them like with a calm mind.
Oh, yeah. So the practical application of that is called mushin, mind of no mind. So a yogi would refer to that as samadhi. Anybody can experience this. You don't have to be a martial artist, but it's when you've trained in something for so long and so much repetitive work. So for example, in karate, the basic thing that you're taught first is a punch, right? You have to stand at a wall and you have to do this thousands of times. You begin class doing it and you're a black belt and you're still standing at a wall punching. You have to do it over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where it just becomes so ingrained in your muscle memory that you don't have to think anymore. And your brain is not called upon to do this technique, so that when you are called upon in a moment of someone, in theory, like wanting to attack you, you can respond without having to think. Because that moment that you think too much is when you will lose the fight.
Well, and I think it's the moment that you think too much is also the moment where the emotion comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's
so,
ego. Thinking is ego,
yes.
And ego is emotion. So you're taking all of that out of the equation. So mushin is mind of no mind. So you'll be able to move without any thought in your brain. And so what happens is going back to the example of a kata, it's considered moving meditation in martial arts, because you do this kata so many times that when you go to do it, you are not there. You are just, your body is just representing this form. And it just, you can tell the difference between someone who's thinking too much doing a kata and someone who just knows it so well that they're not even having to think about it at all. They're just one with that, and they're able to tap into like this other consciousness. So for example, in yoga, that would be a yogi who is just has their flow down so much that, even just probably a basic sun salutation, you do over and over and over and over and over again. Now, in a regular yoga class, if you came into a yoga class and your yoga teacher said, we're going to do sun salutations for an hour and a half straight, I guarantee you almost every person would fucking leave that room.
Yeah. We were just talking about this.
But listen to this. You go into a karate class and your teacher says, stand in kibarachi, which is horse riding stance, face a wall, and we're going to do 4 moves the entire class, and you do it. And that is like,
why is the discipline so different, do you think?
Well, I think...
Well, it's not. In India, like, you would do the sun salutations. I think it's just in America, you have to modify and apply the teachings to what people are ready for. And not everybody in America is ready to go into yoga class and do 5 moves for an hour and a half straight, super hardcore. They just read about yoga in some like magazine that's super mainstream, and they don't want some hardcore thing. So you have to just give them the little bit version of it. But then if it connects with their soul, they'll stick with it for a really long time. And maybe someday that one person out of like 100 people in that yoga class will end up in India someday, like really into like a deep meditation yoga practice that's like so far deeper than they ever imagined when they stepped into that first class. And it's the same way with like martial arts. Do you know how many people walk into a karate class being like, I'm going to get my black belt, and they never make it? There's a very, very high dropout rate for black belts. I mean, for just martial arts to like get to black belt. And then even in martial arts, you are taught when you get your black belt, guess what? You just started. Oh, now your journey begins. That's what you're told when you get your black belt. Congratulations. You can start learning now.
Valerie and I don't even think I've introduced you, Valerie. We're all like huddling around one mic, but Valerie's my yogi friend from Rhode Island and my step-in co-host while BJ's back in California. We were just talking about this morning, that advanced yoga is not like all these fancy sequences and doing something different every time. And I really like a fun flow and like all that shit. It's advanced yoga is you come to my class and for an hour, we're going to fold and we're going to rise.
Oh my God.
And we're going to fold and we're going to rise.
Yeah.
And advanced yoga within that simple movement is seeing that every single element and moment of that rise and that fold is new and it's full of wonder and it's curious.
That's exactly how karate is too.
Yes.
We've made the connection.
But it's just, I think it's been lost in just the Western way that we, and I'm so torn on it because part of me is like, there's so much yoga in California, in Southern California. And I swear to God, it's been like going to like a circus sometimes. Like I've never left a yoga class with a headache until I went to California.
Some karate schools that are just like,
so I think it's like the same thing.
It's watered down. It's just to get people in the door, and you're just like, but there are still really traditional schools out there. You just have to find them,
But I also
yoga's a lot like that too.
Yoga's a lot like that. And so where I'm torn is it's also like, what is my goal as a yoga teacher? I mean, I know like I've got like lots of different tiers and all of that, but like the most basic goal I have is roll out that mat and get on the mat.
Yeah.
And get away from your phone and get away from all the things that you think are real and they're not. And so if that's an access point for somebody, like if their access point is so different than mine, maybe just in that class, they feel their legs for the first time in 5 years. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm torn because I think the idea of advanced yoga has been so lost in the gymnastics of it. Mm-hmm. But as long as I know what's true for me and that I can enter into each class as a teacher without judgment and seeing that everybody's coming in a different entry point and being okay with it. I think it's that neutrality, rising above in that higher vibration. It's so cool because I've never had this kind of in-depth conversation about martial arts, and it's very much like the yogic tradition. Like it's in even like the techniques of the mind and how do we like train our mind, all of these techniques and the moves and everything are very, very, very basic and simple.
It's all about going back to the basics.
It's all about going back to where from where we came is essentially, right? Isn't that our goal, is to kind of get back to who we are and where we came from? I have a question about you growing up and you're like in this dojo and you're reading like these ancient like Japanese spirituality texts. What is going on like with your what is your life like in school? Like what is your social, or did you just not even care about that?
I'm kind of a natural introvert.
You're such an old soul.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's something going on. I've met some old souls, but I have some interesting karma in this lifetime. There are things like ripening that are like really fucking interesting. Then some of them are really traumatic, and some of them are like really sad and like really unbelievably hard to deal with. But then some of them are just so like, oh, how fortunate. Okay, well, I mean, my life was like any other kid. I mean, I had to wake up at like 5:45 in the morning, get to school by 7:15, trudge through the day, try and get good grades. I was an honor student by the skin of my teeth. I would go to work after school. I worked at like this little children's program, so I worked with little kids, and I loved kids and always worked with them. And then I would try and sneak in some homework, eat, and then around 7:00 it was time to go to the dojo. But if I was teaching, I had to be there at like 5:30 to open. I got there at 5:30 and taught from 5:30 to 6:30 and talked to the parents. And then it was like either I took the adult class or I would help teach part of the adult class because the upper ranks were considered very vital to teaching the lower ranks. So, we would all do our warm-ups and like our basics. And then if there were white belts in the class, I would go off and with them with a separate group and start teaching them. and then come back to class. And then after that class is over, we would have advanced class, which was just for the upper ranks to actually, then it was us, like really practicing our katas that were higher ranks. So we would just get our senseis focus on that more advanced technique. By the weekend, I was so tired. And if I was lucky, I'd like go see some of my favorite bands. And that was it. That was my life. It was great. And it's kind of still my life now, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I do think you're an ancient soul. And I know that there's older souls than us out there. But just the fact that we're like talking about this and that you've met these old souls, like just says something about, you know, the vibration of your own being. So you had just mentioned karma. Yeah. And so karma to me feels very like Buddhist, like India, like yoga. What is the philosophy of that through like the Japanese martial arts and like the soul or what, I don't know what they refer to it as.
I became a backwards philosopher. So because I grew up in a Japanese dojo, I was taught Zazen and Zen meditation. And I read everything that had to do with Zazen and Zen meditation. And that was, I had blinders on. Was my beginning and my end. I was so obsessed that it was just like, how do I go live in Japan? And I made it happen twice. You know what I mean? Like I manifested a lot of cool shit. I never thought about India or yoga because everything that I needed spiritually and physically, I was fulfilled by martial arts and meditation in that concept. But what happened was when I was about 25, I went through a really hard breakup. A friend of mine suggested that I learn meditation. He was a meditator, a practitioner through a Tibetan tradition. And so I was like, oh, well, yeah, I know meditation, but I didn't have a teacher and I didn't have a sangha. I had nothing. It was just me sitting in my room alone doing what I had done since I was, 10 years ago. And that wasn't getting me where I needed to be because I was going through a lot. So I needed more. And so I went to this meditation center in Boston, which taught meditation, shamatha meditation, from a traditional Tibetan point of view. And I was like blown away because when I talk about karma ripening, and this is a long roundabout answer to how I think about karma, is that there's a publication called Shambhala Publications.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, you know it, right?
Right.
Yeah, everybody knows Shambhala Publications, right? Like half of my books on my shelf about karate and martial arts were from Shambhala Publications, right? So my friend goes, you should go to this center. And I looked it up online. It was called the Shambhala Center. I was like, oh, that's weird. I'll go check it out. They have the same name as the books that I read. I had no idea it was actually like the meditation center of the publicists, and that it was like a whole community. And I go, and like my second time there, the woman who started Shambhala Publications in the 60s, who learned meditation from Choga Trungpa Rinpoche, who came to the United States in the 60s, was like, I could be your meditation teacher. And I was like, what? I'm like, I have your books on my shelf. You started that publication company. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, this is like a huge deal for me. The term would be auspicious. Mm-hmm. My big word when I was 25 or 26 that I love to throw around was, oh, how auspicious. I started learning Tibetan meditation and from the Indian masters. And so it's interesting because the student, like the teachings appear to you when the student is ready. Totally. And I was really, really apparently ready at that point in my life to just focus on my mind and my meditation practice. And I had stepped away from the dojo and I wasn't training that much anymore. But I went down this other pathway. So I backtrack from Japan to Tibet. Well, then I meet John a few years later. So I backtrack even further from the Tibetan yogi master training to the Indian masters. And of course, everything that Tibetans learned came from India. So now my path right now where I'm studying is very like Indian based, like yoga. And so now I love my yoga. I love my Hare Krishna mantras. Like I love Radha Krishna. And it's all very like great because I can go from like talking about Radha Krishna in one sentence to like, oh yeah, sure, we could talk about Japanese samurai too. And I can tell you how they're all connected.
Yeah. But does it all come from the Indian yogic philosophy?
Yeah.
It's all born.
Everything comes from India.
Because,
it's so mysterious.
It's auspicious.
It's auspicious.
So I went through an auspicious stage. When I went to India, like I came back and I was like, that was my new word. Everything was auspicious. Oh, it was so auspicious of you. So and that's the thing, it all boils down. And so a lot of people will ask me like, well, what kind of meditation do you practice, and what's your lineage, and blah, 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 and all this stuff.
I get that throughout the years, and everybody wants to give you one, and they want to hear just one.
They just want to hear
answer.
like, and so I actually went to my teacher, and I was like, how do I answer that? And basically like, Valerie's got the same teacher as I do, and I really believe he's just from such a pure, he's just like, you practice meditation. Don't get caught up in what the name of it is or what the lineage is and all this stuff. He's like, because all of it brings you to the same place. And what's your goal? Okay, samadhi. All right, good. Yeah, well, then stop worrying about what the label is 100%. And just do the work.
100%. Right now, if we look up on our bookshelf, so we have the Bhagavatam, which is like the most ancient text in India, the oldest like spiritual
those all like
text.
the volumes?
Yeah. There's like 20 something volumes. It's a whole thing. So I'm working my way through reading the Bhagavatam, and John can like read the Sanskrit and pronounce it because he actually like lived in the temples in India, and I can mispronounce every word and like stumble my way through it like I'm a first grader, and he's just like blah 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 and explains it all. And so I'm working my way through that right now, and I'm telling you, like on every page, it's like, I've heard this all before. So I'm reading the Bhagavatam for the first time, but I'm like, oh yeah, well when I was 15 and reading Zen and the martial arts, it's like this and like that. And it transformed in their culture as this teaching and that. And so it's just all just feels like home to me. And once you realize that, when someone asks you, oh, what do you study? What's your lineage? I try and really hard I'm not going to put them down for asking such a simpleton question, but people who have really dug deep in their spiritual path know that it's not such a simple answer.
No, and it's not about a label, and there's not one that's better than the other.
Right.
Along the lines of what you were just saying, the Bible too. I've done like a little bit of study of the Bible, not a ton, but like, well, we all know that Jesus was a yogi.
Oh,
and
yeah,
what a lot
totally.
of people,
Jesus totally lived in India.
Yes!
And I love reading
That's
all
what I
the
was just
Jesus
gonna
stuff.
say.
And I was raised in the Lutheran church. Like I went to
people
church
don't
camp.
know.
I know all about the Bible. I was raised like on cheese and crackers on every Sunday, going to church. I was confirmed. You know, it wasn't like a hardcore Catholic thing. Lutheranism is like the badass Protestants that like started the Reformation. So we're like the punk rockers that were like, fuck you, Roman Catholic Church. Like, stop doing this bullshit where all you have to do, you can have a direct connection with God. You don't have to go through the Pope, all this great stuff. One of the best books that I cannot believe I was not introduced to till I was like 30 years old is Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh, it's the best.
I'm embarrassed to say I wasn't given that book until like 5 years ago. And then all of his teachings about Yogananda's teachings about that book is absolutely mind-blowing. And then he connects all the Jesus stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, everything has literally come back to what my parents just wanted me to go to church. And for so long, when I got into Buddhism, I was so scared to like come out as like a Buddhist when I was a teenager, because they were like gonna be like, well, you don't believe in Jesus anymore? And I was like, no. And now I'm all like, I love Jesus. He was a yogi, lived in India, case closed.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people don't know, and they don't tell that through, they're never gonna say that through the Roman Catholic Church here.
No.
that he studied
He
in
did.
India under the masters.
He did.
And he was such a badass. We were actually talking about him on another podcast, and like we get into this whole conversation about how hot he was because he was just like amazing. He was a carpenter, he was a yogi, had that long hair. He was like super
I feel like
buff.
there's a meme in there somewhere, like waiting to come out.
But yeah, it's so okay, to go back to the question of karma, and then I want to move into because we were cruising on the time here. So my question was, and I think we kind of answered it because we realized that everything is coming from the same pot, which is just the infinite knowing. But the Japanese, like, what is their equivalent to karma? Do they have a word for it? Do they?
Oh, I forget.
Yeah, but they do. Like, they believe in this. Like, there's this understanding that our souls are infinite.
Oh yeah.
And then it's just the body that we shed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that there's nothing. There's nothing to fear. Like, but yet we pretend like we go around with this like psychic numbing, like we're not going to die, and like, but we're all here too. Like, there's no better cause of death than birth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I learned I was reintroduced to the concept of reincarnation through Buddhism, and that was one of the things that was like really fascinating. And then the other concept I was introduced to was being vegetarian.
Yeah, perfect segue, my friend.
I think that's what you wanted to get into.
That's one of the things I want to talk about. So yeah, tell us, how'd you get into stop eating other beings' bodies?
I started being a vegetarian or thinking about wanting to be a vegetarian when I started reading a lot of the Buddhist texts. I just assumed that if you were Buddhist, it meant that you were a vegetarian. That was obviously naive at that age, but now that I've gotten older, you can call yourself a Buddhist, apparently, and still eat meat, even though side note, I don't really think that, but I've had to accept a lot of my Buddhist friends who eat meat and come up with
love. You
like,
gotta
reasons why they think for some reason that it's okay, even though it's not. Anyway, so yeah, which I file under like their karma, and I'm like, okay,
I believe
have to
that
pay
too.
for that karma, and it hasn't ripened in this lifetime for you, and it's tough, but that's where I learned about vegetarianism. And the same exact time that I learned about vegetarianism through Buddhism, I was also heavily involved in going to punk rock shows, and the punk rock shows were very into animal rights.
Why is that such a correlation? Like the hardcore punk and the veganism.
It's we've been there.
It's so beautiful.
Imakai,
there's such like this ahimsa within that.
Yeah. So I guess I would, if you had to like have a lineage and point it back to someone, it'd be Imakai from My Inner Threat, who was a vegetarian. And so a lot of kids followed suit from that. And then, they would go to grocery stores on tour to get food and hummus because you couldn't get vegetarian food anywhere else. And then, obviously this guy named John Joseph who sings this band called the Cro-Mags, who's been around since the early 80s, learned about vegetarianism from the Bad Brains. Mm-hmm. And
that saved his ass.
Yeah, it saved his ass. So it all funneled into the hardcore scene as a very intricate mindset of the hardcore scene. Not everybody in punk rock hardcore was vegetarian, but the ones that were, let me tell you, were some of probably the secret ALF people. I mean, I know people that have done a lot of things.
And that's the Animal Liberation.
Yeah, Animal Liberation
Federation or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Have, freed a lot of animals from mink farms and things like that they could have ended up in jail for, and all sorts of wonderful underground work that had been being done. And, I was sitting at a punk rock show and I was like 14 or 15, and the PETA booth was set up. I
think it's PETA.
Anyway, so, and I just sat there and I was exposed to my first animal slaughter video, and I was like sick to my stomach for 2 days, and I went home and I was like, I'm not eating meat anymore. And my parents were like, fuck, You don't even like vegetables. What are you going to eat? And I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. So that's when I became a vegetarian. I wasn't a vegan right away. And then it's been part of my path since that age.
When did the dairy leave your diet?
So this is gonna piss a lot of hardcore vegans off, but I've been vegan and not vegan, and then vegan again, and then not vegan, and then vegan again, and I don't care what anyone else says.
How did that?
So I'm not one of these people who are like, I haven't had a speck of dairy since I was 15. Like, listen, everybody has a different path. Respect my path. I'm vegan now. I've been vegan for a long time, and it's a good thing. And I feel healthy, and I'm happy, and I'm doing it the right way. And I don't have any economic situations that are forcing me to eat whatever foods that's put in front of me. A lot of my choices were made to not be vegan anymore just because I only had a certain amount of money, and if I wasn't going to buy food that week or something, and my friends were feeding me pizza and there wasn't vegan pizza, I ate pizza with cheese on it. It's before social media. It was before the fucking internet really existed. So, like, you were able to make these choices without someone, like, going online the next day being like, I saw Erika eat cheese pizza, and then, like, 20 people commenting about it. It was just, like...
But it's interesting because the whole, well, it's different for everyone. Like for me, it's about living in like ahimsa as much as I possibly can. So causing the least amount of harm that I can in this world. It started with health and performance, and then of course I learned, but it's, it's about progress, not perfection. And, as we know, that anything that we see unacceptable in another person is a direct reflection of what we feel and see on some level within ourselves. That's unhealed, that's unacceptable, that, we have yet to master, to work through.
I'm really thankful that I've been strict vegan, not vegan, and gone back and forth, because now when I work with my nutrition clients who are switching over to a plant-based lifestyle, I have a lot of patience and a lot of progress, not perfection mindset with them. And if they're telling me like, oh, I went to my friend's party and then I ate this and I had eggs in it, they know I'm not going to be like, oh, that's it. I can't coach you anymore because you're not vegan.
Because
like, fuck that shit.
That's violent too. Like now you're
I'm
judging
like
them.
Yeah.
And that's not, so it really is, it's about being inclusive. Like we want to be, and so we use, as much as I would love to just like hammer the vegan and use the vegan, like we use the word plant-based because I want to be inclusive.
Can I tell you I had a dream last night about this podcast meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. This is so funny.
Were both of the microphones working?
This has to do with veganism. Okay. I'm a big dreamer, like huge. And so last night I had a dream that you came over to do the podcast.
And I was dressed as a...
Don't judge me right now. And you had, for some reason, carrying 2 gallons of milk.
Ugh.
Because for some reason you were vegetarian and not vegan. Okay. And I took the milk and threw it out and started screaming at you about how milk is a result of cows being raped for their milk and how they're forced pregnancies and all. Like I was like angry vegan, all of like the terrible videos that you see what happens. I was like yelling at you about it. And I'm
No, I love
that
this.
was my dream last night.
You and I have karma. If we didn't have karma, we wouldn't be sitting here.
So I don't know why, but I woke up and I kind of laughed because I was like, oh, I know in my head, like in real life, you're definitely vegan. But on my subconscious world last night, like I had to teach you a lesson.
And maybe you did in another life. Maybe that's why, because I would say that dairy is one of the things that hurts my heart more than anything. And I'm a mom to Clark, who's my dog.
Yeah.
But I'm not a mom in this life to 2-legged humans. Yeah. And but the thought of a mom's
baby
baby
ripped
being
out of
stolen.
her. I know.
And I was just reading this thing about how the other mother cows in the herd will be next to the
know.
mother whose baby was
I
just
know.
taken, and they'll comfort her.
I know.
And it makes my
It's
heart. And
unbelievable.
Valerie is the mother of 3, so I can't even imagine. Like,
I
she's
can't
like gonna
even
cry.
imagine.
It's so heartbreaking. And then you see this perfect karmic equation of new human mothers feeding their babies the milk that was supposed to go to another baby who's either been sentenced to a life of rape and milk and over milking or veal, where they're slaughtered at the age of like 2 months. And it's such a weird karmic equation, and it's something that like it's so divine that like I don't even want to get involved in that. It's just so crazy to watch, but all we can do is live the example.
Yeah.
And then have like amazing tidbits of information like what we're just talking about come out on the show.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're in this material world.
So you must have taught, maybe you taught that
like,
to me in another life or something, and that's why it hurts my heart so much to think about the dairy industry, because I was a cheese addict in this life.
Oh, yeah. God, I loved
so disgusting.
Cheese when I was, I hated milk when I was a kid.
I never liked milk, but cheese?
Cheese or yogurt.
But now I look at it, it's like coagulated breast milk. It's pus. It's mucus secretion. It's weird. All right.
Gross. So, but yeah.
So you're vegan.
When I get that angry or when I get that frustrated, I really just rely on my where I have evolved personally, spiritually, and I go, oh yeah, I'm a spiritual being living in the material world.
Yeah.
I am subject to the conditions of the material world, which is suffering, ignorance, and passion. And I don't mean passion when you're making out with somebody that you love to make out with, love passion. I mean like the rage passion where like your ego is overcome with emotion that you're blinded by what the nature of reality really is. And those are the laws of the material world. And so I am just having to navigate through that till I'm done here as best I can.
How do you...
And so that's how I get when I take a deep breath and I'm like, okay, I'm living in the material world.
When you get those moments where you are like charged up or you're overcome, like we were talking about it before the microphone, before we plugged the mics in, about, living in New York City and like seeing people homeless and everything. So what kind of mindset do you try and achieve in those moments so that you can move through the intensities of this life?
Oh yeah. I live in New York City now. This is a very heartbreaking place to live. It's nice and cleaned up, everybody thinks, because it's all chain stores now and banks on every corner and Starbucks. But when you actually live here, you do still see how fucked up everything is here. Heroin and drugs are a major problem. Homelessness is a huge problem. There's probably about 5 to 10 homeless people that have set up camp right outside where I live because there's scaffolding set up. So I walk outside my door every day and I have to walk by people living in cardboard boxes. It's really, really hard. It's very heartbreaking. How I deal with that is you just take a deep breath, and sometimes you really have to like honor the fact that it's heartbreaking, because if you keep trying to push it away, like you that's not right, because like this isn't right. Like no one should live like that. No one should be on drugs right now, and this person, it's just terrible. I don't know how they ended up here, but this is as good as it gets. So I get angry that they're there, that I have to walk past this every day because it's hard for me. But then the next thought in my head is, oh my God, this person has nothing and it's cold out and it's rainy and I cannot be angry right now that I have to walk past this. So just maybe I can bring someone a coffee, or maybe I can like bring someone some bananas, or like, you know. I mean, there's been times where if you're in a hurry, you have to walk by really fast and you can't pay attention to this suffering that you see. But sometimes you have the time to stop and turn around and take someone grocery shopping or buy them a sleeping bag or just something that they know that they need in the moment. That's what I try and do to make it a little bit like it's not so difficult for both of us, because it's hard for me. Like, I'm almost crying right now. So everyone's like, oh, you get to live in New York. It's the best thing ever. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's so hard some days.
Yeah. And it's not,
because it's just like so hard. I mean, you live out in California, so you know that, like, when I used to live in Santa Barbara, you know what that means, living in Santa Barbara, and you're just protected from so much. There's homelessness there, but it's not as gritty and as hardcore as it is here.
Those are the perfect words. Like, it's gritty and hardcore. And like the homeless guys, there's like crews of them around different areas. And there's a place where I go running every day and I run by them and there's this crew and I just say, good morning, gentlemen. And, you know, it's always 60, 70 degrees. Yeah. So it's not like the icy cold. And, you know, and they're like, good, you know, the sun is shining and we all woke up. And it's like, it's weird because at least the people that I converse with, some of them are, you know, beyond like recognition of like being able to function as a human, but some of them are like in this place of gratitude because I feel like they're just like, it's warm here and I'm not freezing. But it's hard to see. And I look at those people and I see their perfection as a divine being. And I also remember the law of karma, that everything is a boomerang in this life, and we throw it out and it comes back. And what we don't understand or what we don't consider a lot is that the things that we're experiencing in this life is because we're paying karmic debts from the thousands, millions of lives that we've already lived. And so I think that what you learned like in that dojo when you were 12, 14 years old about moving through the calm mind is like a calm mind is like the highest treasure that we can have. And I believe that it allows us to navigate this life in a way where we have a little bit more clarity and we have more consciousness in our choices. And so that when we know that we can feel when it's put on our heart to go buy a sleeping bag or get a coffee or whatever it is. But it's not, and the further you go down this path and the further that your soul evolves, the harder this shit gets. Like it's not easy. The challenges are bigger, right?
It's because I did so much meditation. I mean, not even as much as my teachers. I mean, I'm just like very basic with it because I have a tendency to start and stop and not stay consistent. So I struggle with that. Through the glimpses of samadhi that I have come across, your heart really opens. In the Tibetan sense, they call it like the heart of the bodhisattva, which is when you commit to helping all beings that you can. I'm not saying I'm a bodhisattva, but what you want to do is you want to aspire to the teachers that you know are the bodhisattvas in each situation that you can. And so New York City has really forced me to apply those teachings in the moment. Whereas if I had chose to stay somewhere pretty, like in Santa Barbara or safe in the suburbs up in Massachusetts, you are not forced and challenged on a daily basis every time you walk around to have to tap into that. You just aren't. Every once in a while, someone cuts you off in traffic or they don't use their blinker. Like, my God, that stuff doesn't even like faze me anymore.
No, and that's
it's like
and that's
I had
why
to
you're
deal
exactly...
with like a homeless guy like walking across like the street half naked, like falling down the other day, and had to call an ambulance for help. That's like,
but you're exactly where you are for your soul evolution right now.
But it's so hard it's sometimes.
Like, sounds pretty gritty.
I mean, you know, John and everybody wants me to love New York so much, and the first year I lived here, I was like, I really struggled, and I remember like. You see all these shirts that say like, I love New York, I love New York. And I'm an East Coaster and I used to come down here all the time. And I always wanted to live in New York. But then when you finally do, you're like, holy shit, this is hard work. Like I am called upon every day to like use these tools that I have been trying to learn. And yeah, it's been like 3 years now since I moved here, 3.5. And it's interesting because now when I leave, I want to come back to New York. So I do love it in a way now.
My teacher always says that when you're called somewhere, it's because you've got karma there.
Yeah.
So you still have karma. And you'll know that when that's cleared up and when you've burned that up, and you guys will know, and you'll probably transcend out of here together.
I have karma in the East Village.
Yeah. All right. Well,
There's nothing wrong about that.
I want to get this wrapping up, but I want to touch upon one other thing, and that's just the importance of this. We've gone pretty deep, and I love it. I love it so much. But I want to touch on the importance of like what we believe in at Yogi Triathlete, of course, and what you work with your clients and athletes is like, where do you stand, or how do you incorporate this idea of like mindfulness and into, where do you think the relationship is between like the mindfulness and the athletics, like as an athlete, as somebody who's trying to better their body, how important it is to incorporate the mind training as well?
My answer to that is I got my certification as a personal trainer in 2007. So it's been 10 years. I felt confident teaching fitness techniques. And then my clients needed nutrition guidance. So having switched back to a plant-based diet, I got my certification in plant-based nutrition through eCornell in 2012, right when the program had just started, and Forks Over Knives had like just launched, and it was like this thing, and it was awesome, and I had great connections with John, and it was just awesome, and I was able to incorporate fitness and nutrition, because there's still a lot of trainers out there who only do fitness. Now I do fitness and nutrition. Okay, so I felt like that was it. No, it's not it, because my clients still struggled. Some of them, not all of them. I was like, oh yeah, now it's mindset. It's the trifecta that I call it the trifecta. So now I've realized as a coach, I am not called upon just to teach you how to do a deadlift. I have to teach you how to do a deadlift. I have to teach you how to do intuitive eating. And I have to teach you some basic mindfulness around those things. Extend that mindfulness technique to everyday life and extend it further to your interactions with your people in your life or your job. So it's quite a lot. But the clients that I have that are up for it are just like, it all works together. You can't compartmentalize it out. I've tried so many times to have a client say, oh, I just want to do nutrition. Okay, well, I'll just do nutrition with you since you said that's the only thing you wanted. And then 2 weeks later, I need a workout. Okay. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I knew you were going to need that. And then 2 weeks after that, it's like, I'm really having a hard time, like staying consistent in my mind, like, and wanting to do the things that I'm saying I wanted to do, and I'm not doing it. And I'm like, that's the mindset training. And then in the end, I'm like, I'm teaching you all the things that I told you in the beginning we all had to do from the start. But it was just little by little. It's great. I love it.
It's because we don't selectively learn. So by coaching in this holistic way, you're able to affect the person's whole life. And I think that's just what the world is called. I hate saying like it's what the world needs, because that means it makes it seem like I know what the world needs. It's what the world is calling for right now. It really is. It's calling out. It's just crying out for more consciousness. And so
it really is. And more clients, are open to learning about meditation. I felt for me, it's such a sacred, and my practice and my spirituality is so sacred to me and personal that I didn't want to share it for a long time with any of my clients. Like, well, I don't want to preach to you. I don't want to sound religious-y, but they want that.
You got to step up as the teacher.
And you got to step up as a teacher and be like, okay, well, here's a great meditation center near you. I want you to make it that you go this week as part of your goals that you're doing. Okay, this is a book that I know that you should read, that pertains to meditation or mindfulness. It could be mindfulness in relation to food, because there's a lot of that out there. It could be mindfulness in relation to just how to deal with work or your partner, all this other stuff, or just actually you just get clients who are like, oh no, I'm ready. Like, I want to dive in. I'm like, okay, I can point you in the direction. Now, I'm not your teacher, but I just don't look at me. Like when there's a Zen saying that's just like somebody's pointing at the moon. You don't want to look at the person pointing. You just look at the moon. So like, I'm like that person pointing you at the moon. I can point you to where the moon is, but you don't look at me as your teacher, because obviously I'm not your teacher, but I will teach you where to go.
Thank you so much for having us in your house, and I'm psyched to finally connect with you in person and feel your energy and your pressure point holds. Those were great. Love her. She is so authentic. Her New York / Massachusetts accent just totally warms my heart. I hope you guys enjoyed today's chat. We'll be back next week with another beautiful human who is inspiring positive action in the world. Thank you so much for your support of the show, sharing it with your friends, leaving a review on Apple Podcast, using the Amazon banner ad on the blog post for this episode for all of your Amazon purchases. Doesn't cost you a thing. And for becoming supporters on Patreon, where for as little as a few bucks a month, you are making a huge impact on the life of the show. This is huge, you guys. We are in deep thanks for your support. We are on a mission to create a better world here at Yogi Triathlete Holistic Performance, and every single one of you is a part of it. Every time you choose to tune in, you add to this momentum. We are all here for unique purposes, and we are all here to live out our unique path to its fullest, sharing our gifts along the way, and becoming the absolute most powerful self-realized self within our divine blueprint. But it is not until we become awake and ready that any of this can begin to fully unfold.